everyone. It's 4 o'clock in the East. I'm Jason Johnson in for Nicole Wallace. Just moments ago, President-elect Joe Biden provided us all a reminder of what presidents usually sound like in moments of crisis, addressing the apparent suicide bombing that rocked downtown Nashville on Christmas Day and the multiple national security threats facing our country. And just weeks to go before he goes from president-elect to president, Biden blasted the Trump administration for dragging its feet on getting his team what it needs to be ready on day one.
As our nation is in a period of transition, we need to make sure that nothing is lost in the handoff. We have encountered roadblocks from the political leadership at the Department of Defense and the Office of Management and Budget. Right now, we just aren't getting all the information that we need for the outgoing administration in key national security areas. It's nothing short, in my view, of irresponsibility.
Trump's continuing refusal to acknowledge reality and do what every president has done before him and coordinate the transfer of power is just one of the many ways he's been acting as the chaos agent in chief. Jeff, yesterday, Trump finally backed down and signed the very same COVID relief bill he threatened to veto for days. In what looks like an attempt to save face, Trump said in a statement he'll send a, quote, red line version of the bill back to Congress, which is not a thing. And he also said that Congress will, quote, focus strongly on his baseless voter fraud claims, which has no real legislative or legal meaning. In just an hour or so, the White House will vote on increasing the stimulus payments from $600 a person to $2,000, which is what Democrats have wanted for months and what Trump began insisting on only last week, even though his own Treasury Secretary negotiated the bill. Even if the House votes for bigger relief checks, Republicans are still not on board, meaning that the proposal is likely to die in the Senate. All that leaves Trump exactly where he was last week. Trump could have signed the bill as early as Thursday, but instead the bill sat on his desk at Mar-a-Lago for days. While Trump went golfing and rage tweeted about everything from voter fraud to how magazines won't put Melania Trump on their cover. Trump signing the bill does avoid disaster. Up to 14 million people would have lost unemployment benefits. Millions more would have lost eviction protections. Money for everything from small business aid to vaccine distribution would have been in limbo. But his temper tantrum did have very real costs. The New York Times reports that people in most states are likely to lose at least a week of expanded benefits, a whole week, at a time when millions need every bit of help they can get. And all this for what? As Democrats and some Republicans pointed out on Sunday before Trump caved, Trump manufactured a crisis just to soothe his ego. President-elect
but to play this old switcheroo game, which is just kind of like, I don't get the point, I don't understand what's being done, why? Unless it's just to create chaos and show power and be upset because you lost the election. Otherwise, I don't understand it.
The president is just posturing. He recently suffered a malignant narcissist harm by losing the election. He continues to go to court to try to overturn the results. He continues to lose, and now he's posturing to make himself, to bring himself back as the hero of the American people.
It is insane. It is really insane. And this president has got to finally do the right thing for the American people and stop worrying about his ego.
A president-elect has already begun leading while the outgoing president does nothing but sow chaos is where we begin this hour. NBC News correspondent Mike Memoli is here live in Wilmington, Delaware. New York Times chief White House correspondent Peter Baker, also with us, A.B. Stoddard, associate editor and columnist for Real Clear Politics, and Aaron Haynes, editor-at-large for The 19th. Mike, I'll start with you. This is the question that I think is on every American's mind. Has Joe Biden just decided he has to get on the stage and grab the microphone because Donald Trump isn't doing anything, or was already planned for him to give these kinds of speeches and talks to sort of smooth the transition process?
Well, Jason, we've really been seeing this over the course of the entire year. I think the Biden team, especially at the onset of the pandemic, saw a leadership vacuum and thought that the best thing they could do to get Biden elected president was to have Biden do what he frankly was hoping to do all along, which is act like the president. And what we're seeing over the course of the transition is really just reinforcing that. What we saw today, I thought, was especially interesting. I mean, I think it's this transition period really has been a reminder to all of us of the need to recalibrate our political thermometers. We've been covering an administration administration led by President Trump for 4 years in which every challenge, real or perceived, is met with a sledgehammer, right? The president often talks about how he's a counterpuncher and he always responds sort of disproportionately to what's in front of him. Biden, we've seen something very different over the course of the past month. There are moments where I think even Democrats want to see the president-elect respond more forcefully to issues like last week when President Trump threatened to veto that COVID relief bill, and Biden simply offered a few brief comments in a speech that was on a different topic last week. This is a very clear exception. The fact that Biden today spoke out as strongly as he did, calling this, as you just heard, irresponsibility, that he's not getting the cooperation from career and political officials at the Pentagon that he feels like his team needs in order to be ready on day one, required a real raising of the political temperature, indeed, from Biden. So we did hear a couple of weeks ago a member of Biden's transition team talking about what he called the pockets of recalcitrance at the Pentagon, standing in the way of the required cooperation. That didn't move the needle enough, and that's why we saw President-elect Biden speaking out the way he did today. But it was also an opportunity for somebody in elected leadership in this country to speak out about what we saw in Nashville. I think it's striking to this day, having covered President Obama during his vacations in Hawaii, especially remember the Christmas Day underwear attempted bombing. That entire trip to Hawaii, which was meant to be a little bit of R&R for Obama and his team, was changed overnight with the need for daily briefings to have the president at the time speak directly to the country. We're not seeing that clearly from President Trump down in Florida at the moment, and that's why we heard it from President-elect Biden today in Wilmington.
And Mike, just quick follow-up. You've got a lot of people on Team Biden who have been in previous administrations. Obviously, they're annoyed by what's been happening. But what is the level of frustration? Is this throwing things at the wall, angry at that they can't get the keys to start their job? Or do some of them feel like, you know what, we've dealt with Trump for 4 years, we can handle a couple more weeks? What's the level of sort of rage within this incoming administration?
Well, I think, with all due respect to the folks at, like, the Commerce Department, for instance, they're getting great levels of cooperation from the, political and career officials there for their agency review teams, and they'll have a smooth transition. But I think the fact that we're seeing this at the Pentagon specifically is causing genuine concern on the Biden team. And so that's the frustration you heard, I think, voiced by the president-elect today. But I think it's also important to note that these are folks who are going to go in, and yes, some people want to criticize that Biden is bringing back so many former officials, but as he put it in a conversation with some Washington columnists just late last week, you need to have people who know where the bodies might be buried to come in and help find them. And that's part of, I think, the reason why we're seeing so many former deputies, former career officials returning, because they're going to be necessary, especially when you have the kind of unfortunate lapses into transition we typically and need to see at this point happening right now, Jason.
AB, let's take a look at Congress right now. So later on this afternoon, the House is going to be voting. They're going to need a 2/3 vote. Probably not going to go through because you've got opposition in the House. From your perspective, is there any chance that there are going to be members of the House GOP who say, look, I've got constituents suffering. It's the holiday season. I need to vote for this relief bill that's going to offer people $2,000. Or do you think there's still just going to be resistance on the part of a lot of Republicans in the House?
It's a really strange place for them to be because they tend to want to go along with President Trump whenever they can. And it's been hard for them to even imagine overriding the veto on the national defense authorization. So when it comes down to these checks, there's been resistance from Republicans, but if he continues to press it, it'll be interesting to see how much erosion there is in the opposition to it. Lindsey Graham was, delightfully and supportingly tweeting out last night that, of course, Congress is going to revisit this right away, promising the president for days on the golf course that he had wins from this bill. And there was a reason for him to sign it, though not one word had been changed. So I think there will be some cheerleading and encouragement from people like Lindsey Graham about upping these amounts. And I think, they see that President Trump is really stuck on this too late in the game, obviously. But he's willing to, I think, really punch the establishment with his own supporters and say, look, if these people are not willing to help you, Mitch McConnell's not willing to help you, but I am. And so I'll be interested in watching to see who breaks on that and wants to support President Trump instead of finding their fiscal rectitude, which is what a lot of them are doing now at the end of the Trump presidency while forgetting it for these 4 years.
Yeah, Peter, I want to move to the Senate and ask that same sort of question. You have a large number of senators who said, hey, I don't want to spend money, this, that, the other. But of course, they've been trying to navigate conflicting messages from President Trump time and time again. What do you hear is going on in the Senate right now? Are Senate Republicans saying, hey, look, we're already going to break about the Electoral College. We need to break on this. Are they getting pressure from Perdue and Loeffler? What is going on with Republicans in the Senate when it comes to when this bill will eventually hit their desk?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, I think this is a moment of testing for these Senate Republicans because the choice to them is to continue to be tethered to a president who is on the way out, who lost the election, who doesn't bother to show up for negotiations and only throws in a grenade after the fact, or to be able to move on. And I think what Mitch McConnell and his Republican leadership would like to do is be able to move on. They've got priorities of their own. They've got these elections coming up, as you say. And dealing with the whims of a mercurial, defeated president is not high on their list. But we'll see whether or not what kind of deference they try to show him. They don't want to directly challenge him. They don't want to directly anger him. But they're not going to go along with it. They're not going to go along with it. It doesn't look like on this defense bill. It doesn't look like they're going to go along with him, obviously, on this COVID relief bill. And I think that you're going to see, this is in some ways a test of what this post-presidency is going to be like, because you're going to have a situation here where Republicans crafted a deal with the Democrats and with the administration and all jumped off, the plank at the same time, holding hands, saying, OK, we're in it together, only to have the president, cut the plank out from under them. Now he's going to be doing this from the outside as a former president from Mar-a-Lago, once again, sort of challenging them and their ability to decide for themselves how they plan to govern. So I think these next few days are kind of a very interesting test for the Senate Republicans about not just what happens now, but what's going to happen in the next months and years to come.
Yeah, Peter, it's really compelling to me because we constantly have this situation with Trump where, he's essentially the arsonist who keeps starting fires and then saying, hey, I'm the fireman. But then again, I want to defund the fire department, and no one ever really knows in the Senate how to behave. Aaron, when we look at what's actually going to be in this bill, so Democrats are saying, hey, look, we want to make sure it's 2,000. First President Trump said 600 was measly. Now he's up to 2,000. People are caught in this situation. The real numbers of this, and I saw you tweet about this earlier, $600 is about 3 days' work for the average American. And even $2,000 isn't that much. Are they still arguing over something that's really not going to materially affect the lives of most Americans? Out in the real world, how do people look at the idea of senators and congresspeople who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year arguing over $600 or $2,000?
Yeah, I mean, Jason, what really strikes me in all of these stories about the pandemic relief packages and senators and members of Congress haggling over $600 versus $1,200 versus $2,000 is to really hear the voices of everyday Americans who are struggling and who need this lifeline of support from the federal government as they try to navigate a pandemic that they may never get sick from, but that frankly is definitely impacting them from an economic standpoint. And they, say in quote after quote, they don't understand why Congress can't make this happen. They didn't understand why the president was kind of stalling on, signing that legislation that they needed. The Labor Department is now going to be working with states that are scrambling to get this unemployment, to get these benefits out to residents in their respective states. And again, you've got this Senate race in Georgia, the Senate runoffs that are absolutely being impacted by this pandemic because you had, two incumbent senators, David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler, who, have been campaigning on this in the final days of the election, saying that they have been delivering for Georgians, even as Democrats are saying, that this is not enough for the Georgians who they know are hurting across the state and are making a direct connection between this policy and the stakes of the future balance of power in the Senate.
Following up on that, Aaron, so are Ossoff and Warnock, are they really hitting Loeffler and Perdue on this relief bill? Are they really talking about the fact that, hey, these guys are trying to, steal $2,000 out of your pocket that you've paid for with your own tax money? Or are they more focused on maybe local issues like COVID or lack of hospitals or other issues? Is this a real focus in this last week?
Well, it's twofold. It's definitely, localizing the issues for Georgians, making these races about the local issues that are priorities for Georgia voters. But it is also about the pandemic, which is looming large over this entire country and certainly looming large over Georgia as this pandemic is surging anew in places, including my home state. And what Ossoff and Warnock have been saying is that while Georgians got sick, people like David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler got rich during this pandemic and did not look out for Georgians. That has been their narrative, as David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler have tried to counter that, saying that they have been delivering, that they have been looking out for small businesses and looking out for everyday Georgians. And so, this is really going to come down to who voters believe. We've seen that turnout is at 2.1 million people who've already cast their ballots down in Georgia, which is down a bit from the general election turnout. But Black voters, notably, their turnout is up since November. And so this pandemic issue could certainly be something galvanizing the very folks who are being disproportionately impacted from both a public health and an economic standpoint in Georgia.
AB, speaking of people who've been galvanized, he's lost a lot of support. He didn't just lose the election. He's lost sometimes some commentators on Fox News. He's lost some other networks. He's lost some religious leaders. And now he's lost the New York Post, which just put out an editorial basically asking Trump, a la Elsa, let it go, let it go, let it go. You need to be done. Do you think that this newspaper in particular, with the relationship that Donald Trump used to have with New York media, is it finally sinking in that he needs to spend the last 20 or so days of his presidency maybe cleaning up his reputation? Or do you think that the Republicans who are supporting him and the president himself are still saying, I'm going to fight this until January 6th?
Well, Donald Trump is, he absolutely has these sort of media icons in his mind, Time Magazine, the New York Post that he grew up with, and he clings to in 60 Minutes and believes are really important. So this will embarrass him. There's no question. But he's impenetrable on these topics. They're not going to be shaming him into better behavior on his way out the door. He's going to continue to burn things down. January 6th is so important to this man. It is going to be a made-for-television event with a worldwide audience where people are going to be fighting for him and really busting up our system of governance that dictated by the Constitution, just really burning it down in public on TV. It will be a scandal, and he's going to really need this event. He wants there to be protests outside, and he wants people in Congress, congressional allies in the Senate and in the House to be, quote, fighting for him on television. This is what he needs. We don't know what he's going to do after January 6th, but Donald Trump is not going to be shamed by an editorial in the New York Post, to be sure.
I tell you, AB, as much as I have resisted all these years to quote Donald Trump, January 6th will be the day when America officially says you're fired. Mike Mimley, Peter Baker, AB Stoddard, and Aaron Haynes, thank you all. When we come back, as we've been discussing, we are now just a week and a day away from the all-important Georgia Senate races. We'll get a closer look at the ground game going on there. And the very latest in the hunt for a possible motive for that Christmas Day bombing in Nashville, and why authorities are still hesitant to label this type of attack. Plus, looking ahead to a post-holiday pandemic surge. December has been the deadliest month already. Travel is peaking, and politicians are stirring the pot when it comes to getting the nation to do the right thing in fighting off coronavirus. All these stories and more when Deadline White House continues after this. Don't go anywhere.